So, folks, there's this guy named Michael Knowles, and essentially, he's been on a crusade to, I guess, stop pornography somehow, with his valiant ally, Senator Mike Lee. Now, Mike Lee is also a long-time advocate against pornography. And I'm just going to say up front that you cannot be in favor of free speech and also in favor of banning pornography. That's just not really a consistent, doable position whatsoever. Because basically how this works, and how it has worked every single time, people come for pornography or try to impose regulations on pornography, is that they start labeling more and more things as pornographic. You know, like in the outset, like it might seem at first blush like, oh, it's easy, you know, you just go after the big porn sites. However, what ends up happening is that where do you draw the line, right? Because for conservatives, and particular like evangelical conservatives, or Catholic conservatives, like they tend to draw the line at people displaying affection of any kind in public, right? So gay people holding hands or kissing in public, that's too pornographic. That's disgusting. It has to be banned. It winds up like going from like porn sites to, media in general to, public behavior to, it becomes more and more oppressive. And, you might say, well, like, Jack, that's a slippery slope fallacy. Like, obviously they would stop somewhere. And the answer is no. This is their attempt to essentially enforce their heteronormative worldview on a public that does not want it. It does not stop. It is just one of the most commonly used pathways to banning all queer content and queer people from public life. And so it is important to point that out at the outset, that like, if you defend freedom of speech, you also need to defend porn. At least the right for porn to exist. And that doesn't necessarily mean the right for porn to exist without like, good faith attempts to make sure that like adults only have access to that content, etc. Or like attempts to say, hey, platforms can regulate whether or not porn can be on their platforms, stuff like that. I think that there's wiggle room in those regards, but like for the government to step in and ban porn, I think is a very, very negative step, and it is going to be done to chill free speech and criminalize LGBTQ people. Okay? So now that we've kind of established that front of the conversation, let's jump in here.
I want to get to whether or not to ban porn. Should the federal government
also, like, for a guy who like wants to like eliminate gay people from society and like trans people from society, the fact that he wusses out of saying the word porn is such a weak cucked move, Like if you're gonna ban it, like at least have the chutzpah to say the word.
Ban? Can the federal government ban? Doesn't the federal government already sort of ban and we all just kind of forgot about it and it's a little bit ambiguous? Here,
no.
To help us answer all of these questions, one of the great men of Washington, D.C., one of the great men in our country who has authored a bill to outlaw online pornography, that would be Senator Mike Lee. Senator Lee, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you, Michael. Good to be with you.
Also, thank you for the bill. I think it's great. I've been calling for this sort of thing for a long time. And whenever I've suggested that maybe it's not the best idea to have our country, especially children, just saturated in some of the most extreme, degrading, vicious material imaginable, people
see now, like, here's the thing. Remember what I said right at the front? When Michael Knowles says, "Hey, our children are saturated in pornography," what do you think he means? Because if you're a parent and you are paying even a moderate amount of attention to what your child consumes on the internet, you know, like a decent parent would, you're going to notice that they aren't just completely deluged by pornography. You know? Like, this is like a kind of situation where turns out parents need to take some personal responsibility. It's wild that Republicans are in favor of personal responsibility right up until it actually requires them to personally do something. You know? Yeah, like, when Michael Knowles is talking about pornography, he's talking about, you know, like two gay Muppets holding hands. Like, he's thinking about Bert and Ernie from Sesame Street, and he's like, "Oh, that's disgusting and degenerate." Or at least that's what, you know, he'd like you to believe. You know, because Michael Knowles has appeared as a gay man in a, you know, a fairly prominent art film in the past, and you know, like, I think maybe he might be casting some stones here in a glass house. I'm just throwing that out there.
People tell me that there is nothing more American than hardcore, and it's protected by the First Amendment, and that if you want to do anything about it, you're an ahistorical fascist or something. You know a thing or two about the law. I think you've read the Constitution once or twice, one of the leading lawyers in the country. What say you?
Yeah. You know, like, what, I don't know, like, Mike Lee, what would you say about this picture? Like, what should be done to these men in particular? You know, I'm just throwing that out there. Because I think it's fine to artistically express ideas in a variety of different ways, including with naked bodies. I think that's fine. But I think we start getting into some weird territory when you're like, we need to ban porn. Is it okay for men to be shirtless? Why? Are not men being shirtless, you know, running around in public in their little short shorts with their tight buttocks and their rippling abs, are they not an incitement into lascivious thoughts? I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there that, like, seems kind of like, I don't know. Maybe to Michael Knowles, the rippling abs of a fit man might be too pornographic. Just throwing that out there, okay? Yeah, you know, is anything that is an incitement to promiscuousness, is that pornographic? This is the reason, by the way, that porn is protected speech.
Look, at the outset, we got to point out obscenity is not protected by the First Amendment. Never has been. To this day, it is not. The Supreme Court acknowledges that the First Amendment doesn't cover obscenity. The question is, what is obscenity? How is it defined? Some of those definitions have changed over time. There is, and you referred to this a moment ago, Michael, there's this sometimes unspoken but widely held false assumption that there is a universal human.
Now let's just take a look. Let's just take a look at Cornell Law School here. Obscenity is evaluated by federal and state courts alike using a three-part test established by Miller v. California. The Miller test for obscenity includes the following criteria: whether the average person sees the material as having/encouraging excessive sexual interest based on community standards, whether the material depicts or describes sexual conduct in a clearly offensive way as defined by the applicable state law, and whether the work, when considered in its entirety, lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. For example, child pornography violates all three parts of the Miller test, and making or distributing such material is a crime. That is a great example of that. However, pornography of, consenting adults doesn't usually rise to this level, and that is largely because it is considered, in some sense, an artistic work. That like I'm sorry, but like you kind of have to get into like what is art at that point. What is protected as art? Because there are plenty of, I've talked about this before. Here's a good example of a piece of art that was considered obscene and people attempted to ban it, right? Take, for example, this image, right? This is an image of an artistic piece of work that I've talked about on this stream before several times in the past, called Piss Christ. Now, this is from 1987. It's by an American photographer called named Andre Serrano. And essentially, the nature of this is that it is a crucifix depicting Jesus Christ, that he submerged in a glass tank of his own urine, okay? And then he photographed it, right? And it's intended on his part. He's a devout Catholic, right? It's intended on his part to like depict Christ kind of taking on like the scum and disgusting nature of humanity, right? It is designed to kind of evoke like the taking on of sin that like Christ, for Christians, like personifies, right? And so to him, this is a very like personal and moving piece of art. To a lot of other Christians and a lot of other to Catholics, to various other Christians, this was seen as obscene, lacking any and all value, right? People attacked it as blasphemous. They wanted it to be banned. It's interesting. And one of the things that I would like to put forward here is that a lot of people would call this obscene. However, its value as art seems pretty straightforward, right? And essentially, I'm calling BS. No one saw that. No, they absolutely did. Yeah. He got a lot of blowback on this piece. In fact, like this piece of art in particular has been attacked by like vigilantes with hammers to try and destroy it. Like it's a whole thing. There's like an entire odyssey behind this image, right? So that being said, right? Obscenity and what is obscene to each individual might vary, but what is considered obscenity under the law is very, very different. And essentially what Mike Lee is going to try to do here, and I haven't seen this, but I can see the clockwork, of his mind turning. Essentially what Mike Lee is going to do is that, like, well, many different definitions of obscenity have been used, and we just want to use a different definition that includes all pornography and anything that might tempt people into, sex. With that being said, let's see. Let's see where this goes, huh? See how it plays out.
Human right or a universal, undeniable, impenetrable First Amendment right to distribute explicit material, obscene material even, and make it available to children. And there's anything the government can do about it because, well, the First Amendment.
Wait, it's absolutely illegal to just show children pornography. Like the argument that like, oh yeah, it's totally legal to show children pornography. No, it's not. Like that would be child abuse. Make it available to children. Why do they keep lying like this? They lie like this to try and move the Overton window to make it seem like the entire goal of the porn industry is to get like younger and younger people watching porn, and to like try and broaden the idea that like of what is pornographic in nature. Yeah, this is what leads to like famous works of art being like covered up with like, modesty cloths, or like the images of the statue of David being edited in like, different, it's bizarre. It's weird, right? And it's because their intention is exactly correct, Q-Berry Shortcake, to broaden the definition of pornography until it includes, gay people shouldn't be allowed to exist publicly, Yeah, like it, to them, even talking about pornography is so lascivious and so sexual and prurient in nature that like they prurient. I always mispronounce that word. In nature, that like they can't even say the word. Yeah, they're weaseling out of it. Exactly.
It simply isn't true. It's never been the case. It's not the case today. What my bill is about really is about trying to address the modern age. Remember, decades ago, people viewed it differently than they do today. They'd either have to go to a movie theater in a shitty part of town, or maybe they'd have to buy something, a magazine or something physically. And when they did that, typically there were laws and other restrictions that made sure that they weren't selling it to kids, made sure that if the cover was explicit, that it wasn't something that could be viewed by children. There were restrictions on it. Now in the internet age,
you also, in like the 1950s, just kind of let children wander. Like just you were just like, yeah, go outside, go wander town, find something to do, just do it outside. Like children would just do that. And like I can tell you, because I know people who grew up in like the 70s and 80s, that like kids found their way to porn a lot. Like, there's a reason why like their uncle's collection, was always like a talk. Like there were some, I know like people who grew up in like the middle of nowhere, and like they would like have essentially a jerk off shack in the woods where like, teens would like go and like collect like their Playboys or whatever that they could find. And like, it was just kind of like they collected all the material in one place, I'm not saying like that's right or good or anything, but I'm saying that like him trying to talk about this imagined past where like children didn't like go after this content or had no means of getting it, like they figured it out. Like people who wanted to figure that out could figure that out. Like it's not like breaking into like the Federal Reserve. It's not exactly the worst, like, or the hardest thing to do, So all I'm saying is that like the solution to this entire problem, as it was back then, is just paying attention to your children and actually parenting them. Like this isn't a big deal if you can like just talk to your kid about it and say like, this is inappropriate. Like you can have a talk with your kids. Educate your children about this. The entire reason we need sex ed in the first place is because Republican parents don't educate their children on like how to be safe like in sexual scenarios. And so like I don't know, step up. Be better parents. Take some personal responsibility.
This stuff is widely available. Children have easy, ready access to pornographic material all the time. We need to update our laws. To make sure that it's not just fair game out there, so that we can protect our children. That's why I introduced.
Like, just as an FYI, like, this is not about protecting children. Okay, this is not about protecting children. If Republicans cared about protecting children, they would more seriously follow up investigations into like the Boy Scouts, the Catholic Church, the evangelical churches, the Baptist or the Baptist Council. There was like a big thing about that. They would be more serious about that and patrolling it in their own circles. They don't. They don't do that. They just reassign pastors. They move priests around. They cover up investigations, and like they don't care about protecting children from predation. This is entirely about like chilling speech. By no means is it sincere. Exactly, Map Drawer. Exactly. And by the way, if you actually gave a shit about this topic, you would listen to what groups talk about.
How dare you let the queers violate children? That's our job. GOP.
Sake Tanuki, thank you for the 5 tier 1 subs. Very much appreciated. But also, like, queer people generally aren't violating children. And, like, the issue here is that, like, I don't know, like, for example, Michael Knowles shares a platform with Matt Walsh, a man who has actually written an article that actually includes him saying that he would actually maybe help one of his kids if he found out that that child raped another one of his kids. Like, he wrote that. He wrote it. It's still published. You could go look at it. And, like, I don't know, they're all fine being coworkers with Matt Walsh. You know, like, I don't know. I don't think their interest here is protecting children. I don't think you can be interested in protecting children when you are happily a coworker with a guy who defended Josh Duggar, one of the most infamous, like, and public examples of, like, child molestation. Like, I don't think you can do that. So I just want everyone who's watching this to know how full of shit these guys are.
The Interstate Obscenity Definition Act, along with Representative Mary Miller, to establish a comprehensive definition more appropriate for the internet age, so that we can protect kids from obscene materials under federal law.
Well, you know, this point on obscenity, I think, is so important because it's not that your bill, as some people are writing about it, would radically change the American law, you know, impose
17 and counting to 20 years and counting.
Yep. Hey, Saki Tanuki, thank you for the 5 tier 1 subs. I just need you all to understand that, like, their idea of, like, oh, well, it's easily accessible. Again, yes, so are magazines in a house. Like, again, the idea, like, oh, okay, are all women required to be wearing, like, a complete covering so that men can't even, like, imagine what they look like? Are men required to wear those same coverings so women can't imagine what they're looking like? Like, I just... This entire faux concern is like what leads to a really weird situation when it comes to how the government would actually follow up on this, you know? And so it's just like, I don't know. I don't think the issue here is that it's easy for children to, like, find porn, because honestly, if you're a parent and you're paying attention, hey, guess what? There are parental blockers you can install on your child's computer in order to prevent them from going and looking at porn easily. Hey, guess what? You have like different things you can do to talk with your child to make sure that like they're, not interested in checking out that content, or at least if they are, they're going to do it safely and not like get into some horrific shit. Like, the issue here is just, and I know conservatives talk about this all the time, but like, where are the fathers? I guess is my question. Where are the fathers? Why aren't the fathers talking to, why aren't all the conservative fathers talking to their kids about this? Why aren't all the conservative, trad wives talking to their children about this? Why aren't they doing all of the parenting that they constantly claim, other groups of people lack? It just seems to me that if you're doing this and going down this route with like this particular type of argumentation, it seems to me you've ceded the ground and you are in fact arguing that the government needs to come in and do your job as a parent. And I don't know, like, I find that particularly nauseating and weak and disgusting. If you're a parent your goddamn kids. I didn't realize that had to be like a left or right issue, but I guess on the left, we actually care about good parenting.
Severe new restriction. It would just take our legal tradition and continue it and adapt it for the digital age. There have been efforts to do this before. I remember in the 1990s, or I actually don't remember it when I was a kid, but I remember reading about it. There was the Communications Decency Act, which now we focus on how that modifies social media and gives liability to social media companies. But really, it was about decency in communications. And part of that, before part of the law was struck down by radical judges, was about ensuring that kids and wouldn't have access to all this kind of crazy material. There was the Child Online Protection Act, same thing. This was passed with Republican support, Democrat support. There was a Republican Congress. There was Bill Clinton was president. I don't know. This shouldn't be so radical to me. Furthermore,
like the issue that they're dancing around here, and that I haven't talked about yet, right? Simric, thank you for the $10 super chat.
Kinda thankful I grew up with an agnostic father. When he caught me looking at porn at age 12, he just kinda explained to me what sex was and what consent was. He also explained to it was all fake.
I'm going to make the wild assumption here that when he explained that it was all fake, he was talking about the porn and not what sex was and consent. I'm just gonna, yeah, okay. And yes, that's a good thing. More people should do that. Like, I don't know, like there's a certain degree to which parenting requires courage to like bring up difficult topics for your kid and like to explain difficult and like potentially messy parts of the world. And like, I don't know, you should be courageous as a parent. And like, the other aspect of this that I haven't talked that much about is that there is something called obscenity and there is something called indecency under US law, right? And so indecency usually includes nudity, as well as what George Carlin called the 7 dirty words. I might be able to play like a little bit of that. Just real quick. Maybe I can play like audio.
Sometimes, well, hell yeah. Sometimes it's okay, but not all the time. And they're the only words that seem to have that restriction. I mean, there are a lot of words you can say whenever you want, you know. Pneumonia! Nobody gives you a lot of... All right, you can't yell it in the hospital a great deal, but what the hell?
They need to game your game dealer again. Conservatives are horrible parents. Every young adult who hates their parents had conservative parents. They should play Octodad to learn how to do basic parenting.
Octodad is unironically like a really heartwarming and fun game. I should play that on stream sometime. Maybe I'll do that on Father's Day. That would be a fun thing to do for stream, I think. We can all like come together, talk about dads that did us wrong, and talk about how great a dad Octodad is.
There are words that you can say, no problem. Topography! No one has ever gone to jail for screaming topography. But there are some words that you can go to jail for. There are some words that we just have decided we will not say all the time. Sometimes, okay. If you're running through the jungle chasing somebody that we're at war with, you can holler them. If you're shooting a criminal, it's okay. It's the all-American thing. Dirty fuck.
You know, I'm realizing as I'm playing this that maybe it's a bad idea for me to do this on my channel. I'm gonna maybe stop. I'm gonna maybe stop it right there. But the idea here is that there are words that are considered indecent, right? Don't do yeah, I know.
Did people forget that the First Lady did nude modeling? And Donald was in softcore ***** movies and one Russian hardcore film?
Yep, people did. And you want to know something about this? This is why you know that they are full of shit when they talk about this. Right? They have no intention of prosecuting Donald Trump for being in a porn film. They have no intention of like prosecuting the First Lady for doing nude modeling. Like it's all just horse shit that they're going to use to criminalize gay people. That's it. So all I'm trying to say here is that there's a difference between obscenity in the law, which is, if something is classified as obscene, it is illegal, and indecency, which is usually legal, though the government may take steps to try and limit its distribution in certain ways. However,
I
can't
would bet
completely
money that conservative
cut it
parents
off.
extol the virtues of freedom and individuality more than average while being more authoritarian than average. Abuse is baked into conservatism.
Yeah, and like honestly, part of the abuse is the hypocrisy, right? One-Eyed Heathen, thank you for the $10 super chat. The reason I stopped playing Carlin, by the way, is because I'm almost certainly going to get DMCA'd for playing that. So it's a 7-minute long clip. So I figured maybe we can't do that much Carlin. That being said, right, like what they're basically saying is that anything considered indecent should go under. Sorry, anything that's considered indecent and on the internet should go under obscene.
We remember in 2008, the federal government prosecuted, convicted, and jailed for a particularly bad one for obscenity. So I don't know. This doesn't seem radical to me. What would your bill do? How would the law change, or how would the enforcement of the law change if your law is passed?
Yeah, first of all, it's not radically different. And it does just reflect the need to update and modernize things from where they've been since 1973. We have in place today something known as the Miller.
Can we just like take a moment to just like marvel at how these people. Oh, Pluvius, thank you for the $5 dono.
I assume by Russian hardcore you just mean the Marriott P tape. Otherwise, I don't want to think about Captain Toad getting his live action debut.
Then simply don't. But can we just like talk about how like they have like these mahogany offices, and they're like, oh, look at this gold plate on the wall, look at how fine it all is, and then like you look around the room at like the shitty upholstery on the chairs, and like the fact that it's like weirdly empty, and like the fact that this guy can't afford a good webcam to save his life. Like I don't know, man, like they're not doing hot, they're not doing so hot.
Standard. It's a reference to a 1973 Supreme Court case. The standards on it are subjective and vague, making it pretty difficult to apply to any a piece of material in particular.
Yeah, but they're vague for a reason, because it is a subjective it's subjective on purpose. It is left up to the discretion of judges when this law is applicable, when something is deemed obscene. It is left up to the discretion of state judges. That's part of why the Supreme Court has ruled the way it has on these particular laws.
Although all of that said, this tries to preserve as much of the Miller test as possible, given that some of these things are now familiar. So the Miller test determines content to be obscene if it appeals to what they describe as prurient interest, as the prurient interest in sex, and describes sexual conduct or depicts it in a patently obscene, patently offensive way. And then it also has to lack serious literary, artistic.
Like, I do love that Mike Lee is basically coming on here and is looking around and like, but if it's too subjective, whomst among us is supposed to judge? And it's just like probably the people we call judges, whose job it is to judge. Just an idea, just a thought.
Political or scientific value. But the part that talks about depicting sexual content in a patently offensive way itself proves problematic, and it makes reference to state law. The Miller case involved state law, not federal law. There was no such thing as the internet back then. And so we need to update this so that, number one, there's a modern federal standard, a federal standard that determines what happens.
Vinny the game again. These fascists hate freedom. We are supposed to be about freedom. They want to rule like Latin American dictators. You know, like Tropico games, which are on a Steam sale right now.
I do really like this new character, Vinny the Game. The Tropico games are also great. Gamer G, thank you for the $5 dono. Oh, Vinny the Games, thank you for the $5 dono. And Nyadot, thank you for the $5 Canadian. The color of the room is often brown because it emphasizes that these fascists are always full of shit. True.
Marketing, you're distributing on a channel or through an instrumentality of interstate commerce, like the internet, across state lines. Remember, Michael, that there are all kinds of other contexts in which we have overlapping state and federal laws. And sometimes the state law will be applicable when the conduct is occurring entirely within a state. You sometimes need a federal standard if it's going to occur across state lines or through a channel of interstate commerce like the internet. And so this one simplifies it. It attempts to create a standard that is more manageable and understandable, and it supplies its own federal standard so that we don't have to make reference back to a non-existent state law because this is a federal issue. It is, moreover, worth noting that there are other circumstances in which other types of constitutionally protected activities are still subject to federal law restrictions regarding how something is distributed. Let's take the Second Amendment, for example, protects the right to bear arms. There are nonetheless restrictions, including federal laws, that make it so you're not supposed to, you can't legally sell a firearm to somebody unless certain minimum standards are met. And that would include things like the ability to restrict sales to children of firearms. We know that the obscene content, including a lot of pornography out there, does have a well-known, documentable, provable bad effect on children, on adults also, but especially children. And so that's our objective here, because applying
again, it's not like that's one. It's just not what they're trying to do here. Like sorry, that's just not what they're trying to do. And I hope the things that I've brought up prior to this in this video are enough to demonstrate that. But number two, like, yeah, it's harmful to show porn to children, but like at the same time, you can't just outlaw pornography. Like the same way, like there are plenty of things that are harmful to children, right? For example, knives. Knives are very, you know what? Actually, let's go a step further. Guns. Guns are very harmful to children. And it turns out that Republicans don't give a fuck about children and guns. Like, I'm sorry here, but like, the idea here is that like Republicans are willing to say, for example, like, oh, having guns is fine because parents will teach them personal responsibility and how to use the firearms. But somehow the guns are less dangerous in the home to a lot of Republicans than the porn that is still gatekept on the internet. Guns in the home are like the number one cause of child deaths in America. And so like, I don't know here. This guy's presumably not in favor of restricting gun sales to households that have children in them, or from households that have children in them, presumably. And it doesn't seem like he'd be really in favor of laws that would be more intrusive on families. But it's like, I don't know, if you're doing good parenting, presumably your children can learn how to responsibly handle a gun under intense adult supervision. Similarly, if you're doing good parenting, like, this is not going to be a problem. Full stop. If you're actually brave enough to parent your child, this is not going to be a problem. So, I don't know. It seems kind of like he's way more interested in regulating free speech, largely because it moves his political agenda, rather than actually having real concern for children themselves, when, like, children, by and large, are not being harmed by the existence of pornography websites. At least not in, like, the kind of way he's describing. And if they had any interest in actually addressing potential harms that might be done, they would be working with, like, child trafficking groups. Specifically, like, actual internationally recognized child trafficking groups. Like, groups that, like, are against that, obviously. Like, that's way more of an impact on children. And, like, these guys pretend to care about it all the time. And, like, they don't listen to groups when it comes to legislation on this. They ignore different advocacy groups that actually have proven and tested policy proposals that other nations have adopted to bring down the rate of child sex trafficking and to, like, minimize harm done to children. And it's just like, they don't give a shit. Because they don't care about kids. What they care about is their real end goal, which is pushing Christian nationalism and pushing LGBTQ people out of society. Because, again, reiterate, inevitably, their definition of what is considered obscene will include the public existence of LGBTQ people.
Pre-internet standard to the internet era causes a whole lot of challenges, particularly when you're trying to protect kids.
Of course. And
why do Republicans romanticize the 90s and aughts when the shit they were doing now wasn't nearly as acceptable then as it is now? Well, partially because it was more acceptable to do that shit then compared to now. But also partially because nostalgia's kicking in. One of the reasons corporations and, not corporations. One of the reasons people tend to feel more and more nostalgia is because corporations have isolated and atomized us as a society in order to profit off of our loneliness and isolation, right? And what that does in turn is commodify our memories of the past. And that constant production of, like, this better time, this manufacturing of, like, an imagined better past is, like, in part pushed by a capitalist incentive, but it then becomes useful politically because it becomes a real sentiment that people can latch onto.
You can go back even before the founding of the country in the late 18th century. You can go back to the middle of the 17th century, and you can see all sorts of statutes and legal documents pointing out that liberty cannot fall into licentiousness, or people are going to lose their true liberty. And so you have to protect against the kind of content that would appeal to the prurient interest, that would not be constitutionally protected speech, like obscenity or fraud or libel or any other manner of chatter. So to me, it seems perfectly normal. The way that you're talking about it, too, suggests that the law would really go after producers of this content. It's not that...
Also, keep in mind that when they're talking about this, they're also talking about, like, romance novels. They're also talking about, like, Playboy. Like, these people, if they got these laws passed, would not, like, stop at their imagined better past of, like, oh, yeah, we'll allow Playboy to exist, but, you know, we're going to take all the websites offline. Like, no, of course not. Of course they're not just stopping.
You know, the person who's logging onto a website at night is going to have the purity police come to his door. It's just saying, look, there are bad actors who are really abusing our system, who are luring women into usually abusive situations, and who...
That's already against the law. It's already against the law to lure a woman into an abusive situation. That's already illegal. Ooh, that is a very good point, Nomi Sunrider, especially given the white supremacist tendencies of the current administration, that 17th century obscenity included interracial marriage and love. True. And honestly, if you see an interracial commercial to this day, and you go and look at the comments on it, if it's posted on YouTube, you're going to see a lot of people calling it obscene and disgusting, because a lot of people are racist, unfortunately.
Who are exploiting people and who just really have no right to do that, and have never had a right to do that in America. And the internet obviously changed a lot of people's behavior. But, you know, look, that's why we have laws in the first place, is to protect against these things. Really quickly, before I let you go, Senator, what do you think the odds are? Nuts and bolts politics. You're talking to your colleagues. Congressman Miller is talking to her colleagues in the House. Does it get through?
Is this something that is going to pass into law tomorrow or the next day? Absolutely not. People are still grasping to understand it. Right now, there's a lot of incorrect information out there suggesting that this is criminalizing all consumption and distribution in any circumstance. It's not true. So we're going to have to dig our way out of that. This is going to take a while.
Also, just, you know, as a bit of a fun fact, I guess, a lot of states currently have bans on different types of sex toys. I don't know if you guys knew this. But in Alabama, the state of Alabama has argued in court that there is no fundamental right to purchase a product to use in pursuit of having an orgasm. That the state of Alabama has argued that you don't have a right to buy a sex toy to make you come. I just gotta like pause there. Like, how like sexually insecure do you have to be to push a law like that? Like, are you afraid your wife's gonna leave you if she can get a vibrator? Like, Jesus.
Well, Rome wasn't built in a day, and there are a lot of reasons why.
Yeah, like get good at sex, scrub.
Need to act on this, but it's nowhere near the point where I'm expecting passage. Again, the important thing to remember is we're updating the Communications Act of 1934, and we're talking about the distribution of content that, taken as a whole, appeals to the prurient interest in sex, depicts, describes, or represents actual or simulated sexual acts with this objectively observable intent to arouse and so forth, and taken as a whole.
I'm sorry. Wait, what?
Objectively simulated sexual acts with this objectively observable intent to arouse and so forth, and taken as.
I love that his standard is, if it makes me horny, then it must be illegal. That's essentially the argument he's making here. No, don't be talking about your favorite brands of sex toys, please. I would like to monetize this video. It's probably a lost cause at this point, but whatever. Thank you for the $5 Canadian.
As a whole, lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. This would not include the other element of Miller that The one that makes reference to the fact that it has to be patently offensive according to the community standards embodied in whatever state or local law or ordinance is at issue. It makes no sense to maintain that element of the Miller standard in this, because we're talking about a national system, a nationwide network, a channel of interstate commerce that is the internet. It is appropriate for Congress to
Also, can we just talk real quick here about one of the first pieces of art attacked under obscenity laws? Okay, just as a point of reference, it was a book titled "The Life and Adventures of Miss Fanny Hill," and it was written in 1748. Okay, written in 1748, and was in London, and basically came to the U.S. in the early 1800s, and and people in the United States freaked the fuck out about it. Massachusetts outlawed Fanny Hill, and like there had to be a Supreme Court case about it. Like it's like when we talk about it, like we're talking like all romance novels, all erotica written. We're talking like it's bizarre, right? That one would think of this as like, oh man, this is too hot, you know? And it's just, I don't know. I think this is fine, honestly.
This just ties into the whole adoration of virginity. We like people who are inexperienced and bad at a learnable skill. So weird. I like learning new skills. Right?
I like learning new skills too. And you know what? I've learned a lot of new skills in that particular area. And you know what? I'm pretty good. And I'm not insecure at all. And I think people should have the sex toys they want and deserve. Okay? Sake Tanuki, thank you for the 5 tier 1 subs.
Mikhail Knowles looks like a man who slayed dragons. Several bad dragons, in fact. In fact, he quietly seeks newer, badder dragons.
I see what you did there. Thank you for the $5, Paladin Lost. Mike Lee versus Fanny Hill. All I'm trying to say here is that, like, I don't know, their entire cause is one predicated on if you actually prosecuted it. I don't know. Maybe like this Michael Knowles character over here might need to go to prison, you know, for all of the lascivious content he created with no artistic value. You know, I don't know. These nipples are speaking of a highly erotic situation. And, you know, I'm just using Mike Lee's own objective theory here.
Revisit this and to come up with this new, simpler standard, particularly in the internet age.
So
that's
true.
all we're trying to do.
Well, and I love the point also. I mean, I think your point on the distinction between the federal government and matters that pertain to interstate commerce and, you know, state standards, but also when we're living in a time that denies standards entirely, just in principle, then, you know, the appeal to contemporary community standards is kind of a meaningless statement.
It's so true. We live in a time where there are no standards whatsoever. Basically, anyone can become an online pundit. And basically anyone can become a senator. There are no standards whatsoever, you know? It's so true, Michael. Such a cunning observation.
Senator, no flattery at all. You know, you're really one of the greats out there. And this issue, I think, is one of the most important issues. And it's kind of a subtle issue, so people miss it a lot, but it's one of the most important things we could do to help restore a little national health. We'll leave it there. Senator Lee, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks so much, Michael.
By the way, I just love that he's like, it's the national health.
Kinda late now, but this confirms them claiming to be the free speech side was always a complete load of poop emoji. It's still worth pointing the obvious.
It is worth pointing out that they were always full of poop emojis when it came to free speech. None of these people are in favor of free speech, by the way. And I wanted to look up one thing before we round out the segment. Let me just take a quick look.
Vinny the game again. If Mr. Lee wants to ban corn online, maybe he'll buy one of my 500 copies of the DOS game strip poker my uncle left me in his will. 8-bit pixelated booba may stay legal with his law.
Oh, God. Thank you for the $5 dono. I just had a flashback to like some of the worst games published on
Between both
old
those
school
haircuts,
consoles.
straights should never be grooming anyone.
True. Also, even without the haircuts, that's a true statement. Thank you for the 5 tier 1 subs, Sake Tanuki. Appreciate it. I wanted to see what the rate of porn posting was on Twitter prior to Elon taking over and what it is now. However, I'm not finding what I'm looking for here. So I'm just gonna take a look here. Just throwing this open over on the screen here. You know, I don't know. Seems like this directly contradicts Elon Musk's policy over on Twitter. I'm sure Elon Musk, the Twitter free speech warrior, is going to be very, very upset about this. You know? Just so strange. Oh, as of last year, the company estimated that 13% of all posts were
They
porn.
don't care about it. This is about criminalizing existence, regardless of context. Be a loud, angry, abusive parent. As long as that is the norm.
Also, Logan Hill, thank you for the $5 dono. And also, I'm just going to like throw out there a couple of things, right? Number one, the vast majority of revenge porn comes from usually conservative men. You know, red pill manosphere type men, okay? Second of all, who do you think is using AI to do all of that? To like make and generate images of women, generally speaking. You know, we're like, apparently society is going all in on this AI stuff. And as one of the bills that Mike Lee actually voted on, or is going to be asked to vote on, includes language that would restrict states from putting restrictions on AI for the next decade. And I just want to point out here that one of the burgeoning problems we have with AI is that fascist conservatives are using it to harass people, creating digital facsimiles in order to, be really, really disgusting about it. And I have an article here. Yeah. I don't know. Like, maybe this should be more concerning to Republicans. You know, like, I have no problem with porn of consenting adults. I think that's fine. But when you have hundreds of thousands of people using an AI bot to force images of people to play to your fantasies of people you know, I think that's a way bigger problem. And way, way, way more like of something we should take note of. Especially because if you're talking about like parents conservative parents who aren't going to talk to their kids about this stuff, what happens when a kid gets hold of an AI chatbot? What happens? Oh, like genuinely, if they're given no guidance, if they're given as little guidance with an AI chatbot as they're getting from their conservative parents about like porn and sex, like this is just one of the horrible results. You know?
I've tracked down the source of 75% of the bad eye ***** on the internet. He's an Australian man named Shadaleen Brooks.
Is his name really Shadaleen? Also, thank you for the $5 dono, Paladin. science has gone too far. Yeah. And honestly, like, again, I would just point out that, like, these are the things that worry me, right? Like, if a child has access to an AI and it is, able to make them, like, digital, essentially digital facsimiles of people they know to, like, sexually harass and abuse, like, I don't know, that's pretty bad. This is also pretty bad. People are losing loved ones to AI-fueled spiritual fantasies. Self-styled prophets are claiming they've awakened chatbots and accessed the secrets of the universe through ChatGPT. And it's just like, this is a very real problem. And this is way more insidious, and children are way more vulnerable to it than I think, like, consensual porn might be, People are just so fucking lonely. They really are. And that's part of the reason why the hallucinating lying machine pretending to be your friend is so attractive, And eventually, like, if it's just constantly affirming you because it's a machine that wants you to feel good and never challenge you, like, oh, look at that. It starts telling you you're God. You've awakened its true potentials. It's really bizarre. And I've read this article, and I'm not gonna, like, look up the full thing, but, like, people are genuinely going off the deep end because they're so lonely and so isolated. And it's just like, the solution to this is just regulating capitalism, or, in my opinion, maybe getting rid of the capitalism altogether and collectively owning our own workplaces. But that's a conversation for another time. And part of why that would be good is because then parents could actually be parents to their kids. That's actually important. AI is anti-human, and so is capitalism. So, all I'm saying here is that don't let Republicans gaslight you into thinking that, like, they genuinely care about free speech. Don't let them gaslight you into thinking that they genuinely care about protecting children. Don't let them gaslight you when it comes to, pretending that they care about, the well-being of society at large. Because they're full of shit. And I feel like I've pointed out how they're full of shit in numerous different ways here. Jack, I feel like my family raising me in what can be described as how they were raised in the 60s and 70s did me so much good. I've never had social media because I genuinely never wanted it. When you're raised without something and have never wanted it, it makes it so much easier to not rely on it or be addicted to it. Exactly. Like, when you get raised, like, with people who are actually going to be your parents and actually set boundaries and actually, like, talk about hard topics with you. That's important. And, like, I don't know, like, I think it's fine to play, like, video games and stuff, but, like, if you have a kid, like, pay attention to what kind of things they're watching online. Pay attention to, like, what kind of people they're hanging out with when they're playing their video games. Pay attention to your children, for fuck's sake. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. And yeah, it's I don't know. Like, I don't know that there's any reason, like, a 12-year-old needs, like, fucking Snapchat. I'm just throwing that out there. Yeah, it's kind of wild how many people don't seem to parent. And, like, part of it is negligence, shoot bang, and the other part of it is just capitalism takes time. And, like, I talked about this maybe before the segment began a little bit, but, like, part of what capitalism does is this process called atomization, which is breaking down the social barriers that, not barriers, the social ties that bind us all together, right? So you have less time to hang out with your friends. You feel exhausted all the time after a day of work, and you do not feel like you socially can actually go to the pub with your bros. You don't have the money to go to the pub with your bros. You aren't able to, like, go out at night because, like, you just don't have the money or the time or the energy, because the capitalistic framework where you exist in has sapped you of all of that, because you need to constantly be grinding just to live. And so, I mean, unironically, Punky Gal, capitalism doesn't want you jacking off or having sex. They want you consuming. And if you aren't consuming, they want you working. right? Because if you are neither consuming nor working, then you aren't, part of their capitalistic system. It's why, like, the last thing on earth that capitalists want is for you to have time to spend in your public park. It's why the last thing corporations want is for you to just like go on a walk with your friends. Like, it's because that doesn't profit any of them. If you're using like the free and like the freely available spaces in your town or your city, and instead of like giving corporations money, like that's no good to them, whether it's through your labor or through consumption, right? And so, like, and this is, by the way, one of the reasons why one of the more insidious attacks of this Trump administration is going after public libraries. Because public libraries represent, like a huge threat to corporations' share of your time. Because if you're not buying books or buying the movies or buying, insert whatever, and instead getting it for free at your library, like that's, well, you've cheated the system.
Says, consume, don't goon.
Arma Sakant, thank you for the $5 dono. I appreciate it. And they don't want people getting educated, exactly. And lots of shit is behind a paywall in cities, exactly, because of constant lobbying from corporations. 100%. Liz Galahad writes in Riverboat chat, yeah, I work at a gas station in a very small town. It's really sad how many people just show up just to hang out. There's nothing to do, no places to sit. People of all ages show up multiple times a day, though. Yeah, and like, we just kind of got rid of all of the spaces people could hang out at, And so really what has happened here is that, like, that also takes up parental time for parenting.
Vinny to game your legit video game dealer. Why can't kids use flip phones instead of smartphones? Cheap, low tech, prevent app brain rot. I get a new flip phone every time a box falls off a truck.
I'm liking Vinny to game a lot. Thank you for the $5 dono, Vinny. Are they gonna? Yeah, I don't know. My biggest question in all of this anti-porn talk is: are they gonna ban? Are they gonna prosecute Jordan Peterson for posting his milking video? Are they going to ban Jordan Peterson? Are they going to prosecute him? Might be the one way they can get me to support the law. I'm kidding. Yeah, are they gonna prosecute Ted Cruz? Noted spokesperson for Pornhub. To be fair, Jordan Peterson deleted that after it destroyed the lives of millions of children. Huh? Oh, okay. I can tell that maybe I've done too deep of a cut. Before we end the segment, Jordan Peterson posted a video of a porn video of like men being milked, and I'm not going to elaborate on what that means. And he thought it was real, like a real video of what the Chinese state government does to prisoners. And he posted it on his Twitter account. And I just think that that's very funny. Removal of benches to be anti-poor is hurting the elderly and disabled. Absolutely. I despise anti-homeless architecture. When I get a bit older and maybe am less prominent, one of my goals as a member of society that just believes in the fact that we should be fundamentally good to one another, like I want to take like a hacksaw and just like fucking destroy that shit. It's disgusting. Like the idea that you can't even let a homeless person sleep on a goddamn bench outside is weird and fucking gross.
BWA Energy Riverbait Awooga 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 Riverbait.
Omega Star, thank you for the tier 1 sub.
Regular men being milked, or maritime men being milked? Sea men?
Sakitanuki, thank you for the 5 tier 1 subs. We're done with this segment. We're done with this segment. No more.
Riverboat deck is going to town. All the viewers get gather round. Twitch and YouTube and swishy streams. All that content is bursting the seams. Politics, being and plenty more. Your sense of fashion you'll adore. So grab your stuff and hop aboard. We're going straight to Jack's Discord.